The chapel doors were still swinging when the first whisper reached her ears, just loud enough to sting, just quiet enough to pretend it wasn't meant for her. "Look at that dress. My cleaning lady wears better to church." Another voice followed, dripping with venomous amusement. "She bought it off the clearance rack, I bet. Doesn't even look white, more like regret." Jolene stood frozen at the altar's edge, her bouquet trembling in her hands. The silk dress, painstakingly mended, hand-washed, borrowed from her aunt, clung to her like paper, thin and wrinkled with judgment. She hadn't wanted a big wedding, but Liam's family insisted, and now she understood why. Not to celebrate, but to watch her squirm. His mother hadn't looked her in the eye once. His sister wore a smirk like it was stitched into her lipstick. Even the priest glanced toward the pews as if unsure whether to proceed. And then someone said it. Just 3 pews back, loud enough to slice through the organ music. "You can't marry into money looking like charity?" The words struck her like a slap. Her cheeks burned as her heart pounded against the delicate lace of her bodice. She looked to Liam for comfort, but he wasn't even facing her. He was laughing quietly with his best man, oblivious or unwilling to notice the humiliation unraveling her dignity in real time. Her mother sat alone, trying to disappear behind a too small clutch, clearly wishing she could pull her daughter out of this mess. But Jolene stood her ground, even as her knees wobbled. Her voice, when it finally came, was barely audible. "Excuse me," she whispered. The priest paused. Liam turned. A murmur swept through the room like a draft. She turned slowly, facing the crowd, bouquet lowered. "To everyone here who decided I wasn't good enough before I even said my vows, thank you. Truly. Because you've reminded me what marriage should never be built on." Gasps erupted. A woman in pearls clutched her chest. Liam stepped forward, confused. "Jolene, what are you doing?" "Taking my power back." She lifted her chin, but before another word left her lips, the hum of rotors shattered the moment. Outside, above the stained glass windows, a low thumping filled the sky. People turned, windows rattled, and then, impossibly, a sleek silver private jet descended toward the nearby field like a vision from another world. Jolene blinked. It couldn't be, but it was. The doors of the chapel burst open again, and in strode a tall man in a charcoal gray suit, flanked by 2 discreet security men. His salt and pepper hair caught the light, and his eyes, sharp and scanning, locked onto hers with something like pride. "I hope I'm not too late," he said. Murmurs exploded into chaos. Liam's father stood, face pale. Liam looked like he'd swallowed his own tongue. "Dad?" Jolene breathed. "I thought—" "You thought I'd stay away forever," he said, walking straight to her. "And that's on me, but not today. Today, no one calls you poor in my presence." He turned, his voice rising. "For those of you who just insulted the only daughter I've ever had, please know she now owns more of this town than any of you." Jolene's eyes flooded. Her father hadn't spoken to her in over 5 years. But here he was, landing in a jet, walking into her wedding, and turning shame into silence. "I heard the whispers," he said quietly, facing her. "They reached even me, so I figured it was time I showed up." "Why now?" she whispered. "Because someone should have reminded you what you're worth, starting with me." The chapel was silent. Liam's face twisted into a grimace, but he said nothing. Not even an apology. And that told her everything. She didn't need to run anymore. She didn't need to explain. She just turned to her father, handed him the bouquet, and said, "Let's go." Together they walked down the aisle, not toward vows, but away from shame, and the whole room watched, speechless, as the so-called poor girl left in a billionaire's shadow, head high and future unwritten. The inside of the Blacktown car was silent but warm, the kind of insulated quiet that comes from money and guilt layered like velvet. Jolene stared out the tinted window, watching the chapel grow smaller behind them, bouquet still in her lap, fingers pressing against the wilting stems like she needed to hold on to something, even if it was a moment she was already leaving behind. Her father sat across from her, legs crossed neatly, the same subtle cologne he used to wear when she was a child, still lingering in the air. He hadn't changed much, just sharpened, like time had carved the man she barely recognized. "I wasn't sure you'd speak to me," he said, breaking the silence. Jolene didn't turn. "You weren't sure. You disappeared when I was 19, Dad. No calls, no letters. You missed Mom's funeral." His sigh was heavy, but not performative. "And I carry that, every day." "Then why now?" she asked. "Why wait until the humiliation was already halfway done?" "Because I didn't know until this morning," he said. "One of my assistants, her sister was at the wedding. She called crying, said people were treating you like dirt, that you stood up in a dress with seams held by pins and pride holding the rest." "So you dropped everything and flew a jet into a cornfield?" she said dry. "I owed you more than silence," he said, "and I figured if I couldn't undo the years, I could at least end the moment they tried to make you small." Jolene looked at him then, sharp and quiet. "Money doesn't fix everything." "I know," he said, voice low. "I tried to prove that once. Left everything behind thinking I could live a normal life, love your mother, raise you without the weight of who I was. But when the pressure cracked things, I ran back to what I knew best, business, control, and I never had the courage to look back." Her breath caught. "You left because it was easier than staying poor?" "I left because I thought I'd ruin you both more by being there. That's not an excuse. It's cowardice." He leaned forward, folding his hands. "But I never stopped watching. I knew about the scholarships, the waitress jobs, the community college. Even when you married Liam, I checked in, paid off one of your loans anonymously, tried to help without showing up because I thought my presence would only add insult." Jolene's mind reeled. Her pride wanted to reject the possibility that he'd been there all along. Her pain, however, whispered it made sense. "And what now?" she asked. "You want to play daddy because you saved the day in a helicopter?" "No," he said. "I want to start by apologizing, and then ask permission to earn my way back. Not as your father. As a man who failed you but doesn't want that failure to be the final chapter." Jolene closed her eyes. "It's a lot." "Take all the time you need," he said. "I'm not going anywhere this time." The car rolled to a stop in front of a downtown high-rise she'd only ever walked past while window shopping. A doorman in a pristine navy coat opened her door. "Welcome to the Wilshire, Ms. Fields. What is this?" she asked. "Just a safe place to rest," her father said. "You don't have to decide anything tonight, but you're not going back to that town, not until you're ready." He handed her a key card with her name engraved on a leather tag. "And Jolene? Whether or not you forgive me, I'm proud of what you did in there. You didn't just walk away. You rose." For the first time since she left the chapel, she smiled. Small, fragile, but real. "Thank you," she said, "for showing up." She stepped out, heels clicking softly against the marble sidewalk, dress still wrinkled, still imperfect. But the weight on her shoulders was different now. Not shame, not loss, but possibility. The dress hung from the back of the closet door like a ghost she wasn't ready to exorcise. Jolene stood in the center of the luxury apartment suite, its floor-to-ceiling windows painting her in gold from the sunrise outside. But her eyes were on the crumpled white fabric, the same one that drew sneers, whispers and stares just hours ago. The same dress that nearly broke her. She had promised herself she'd throw it out, or burn it, or leave it on a stranger's doorstep with a note that read, "For nightmares, not weddings." But she hadn't. She couldn't. Something about it felt unfinished, like the story stitched into its seams wasn't over. She crossed the room, touching the hem. There, the faint bloodstain from a pinprick while she was hemming it alone. There, the pulled thread where her niece had hugged her too tightly that morning. The imperfections whispered, "You tried, anyway." And suddenly, it didn't feel like a symbol of shame anymore. It felt like survival. A knock at the door broke her thoughts. She opened it to find a hotel staff member holding a sleek shopping bag. "This was left for you, Miss Fields," he said with a bow. Inside, she found a note. No signature, just a quote. "When they laugh at what you wear it louder next time." Beneath it, a pair of glittering designer heels in champagne gold, the exact shade of stubbornness she'd been born with. She laughed, really laughed, for the first time in days. Jolene slipped the shoes on, still in her pajamas, and walked around the apartment like she owned the world. Which, in this moment, she almost did. An hour later, she texted her father. "You up for coffee? I'm buying." The reply came fast. "Only if you let me wear sunglasses indoors like a man in disgrace." They met at the rooftop cafe, where her father already sat with 2 cappuccinos, black sunglasses firmly in place. "You look better today," he said. "Because I didn't cry while brushing my teeth," she replied. "Progress." He smiled. "You're stronger than I remembered." "I had to be," she said. "When people think you're disposable, you either break or get diamond hard." "And the dress?" he asked, eyeing the shopping bag at her side. "Staying with me," she said. "I might wear it again someday. Not to marry someone, but maybe to speak somewhere. Remind girls like me that their worst day isn't their definition." He nodded slowly. "You've become your mother's daughter." That name, Mother, settled between them like a sigh. "She would have made me laugh through all this," Jolene said, "or told me to spike the wedding cake with laxatives." Her father chuckled. "She was never subtle." "She was never afraid," Jolene whispered, "and I need to remember that." He slid a small box toward her. "What's this?" "Not a bribe," he said quickly. "Just an apology that fits in your hand." Inside, a charm bracelet with a single charm, a tiny wedding dress, bent slightly at the waist, as if bowing in defiance. "You're not poor, Jolene," he said, "and not because of what I have, but because of what you carry inside you." She blinked back tears. "You know, I thought I'd wake up today feeling empty, like I'd lost something." "Did you?" "No," she said. "I just didn't know I was carrying the wrong weight all this time." They sipped coffee while the city stirred below, and for the first time since the chapel, Jolene didn't feel judged. She felt seen. And the dress back in her room? That wasn't a reminder of who mocked her. It was a record of how she survived it. Jolene was poring over the apartment's guest welcome guide when her phone buzzed with a number she hadn't seen in months. Liam's mother. Her finger hovered over the screen, part of her tempted to toss the phone across the room. But another part, older, sharper, said, "Let them speak. Let them reveal who they really are." She answered. "Jolene," the woman said, voice too smooth, too sweet. "We were so shocked at the way things unfolded yesterday." "Were you?" Jolene replied flatly. "Because your voice was one of the first I heard laughing." There was a beat of silence. "That was a misunderstanding," she said. "Weddings can be overwhelming. Emotions, miscommunications. But I think we all know you overreacted." Jolene stared at the skyline. I walked away after being publicly humiliated. That's not overreacting. That's called self-respect. And now you're in the papers, Liam's mother said, voice sharpening. There are pictures of that jet, rumors. The word billionaire has come up more than once. Jolene felt it then. What this call was really about. They weren't ashamed. They were threatened. So what do you want? She asked. An apology? We want to make this right, she said too quickly. Liam is devastated. He didn't know his friends and family would behave that way. He's not like us, Jolene. He didn't defend me, she said. That's exactly like you. You don't have to throw everything away, she pushed. We were willing to welcome you into our family, despite everything. Despite my dress? Jolene snapped. Despite my mother working 3 jobs to raise me? Despite not having a trust fund? Don't be dramatic. I'm done with being small to make you comfortable. She ended the call. 10 minutes later, her phone buzzed again. Liam this time. She let it ring. Then again. She turned it off and tossed it in the drawer. If he had anything worth saying, he would have said it when she was still standing in the aisle. Not now, when her name was floating through news cycles and blog posts titled, "The Bride Who Walked into a Jet." Her father knocked on the door mid-afternoon. Bad call? Liam's family, she said. Suddenly remembering I exist now that I'm interesting. That'll happen a lot now, he warned. You'll have to learn who's calling because they love you, and who's calling because they missed their shot. I never even wanted a spotlight, Jolene muttered. I just wanted a husband who didn't let people laugh at me. You wanted respect, he corrected. That's bigger than love sometimes. She sat on the edge of the bed. Do you think I made a mistake walking away? Her father paused. I think you made a choice based on truth, and truth is never a mistake. That evening, she walked out to the balcony, the city lights buzzing below, a warm breeze catching the edge of her nightgown. Her life, only 24 hours ago, had been lined up neatly like a row of dominoes. Wedding, modest house, quiet compromises. Now, everything was in motion, unpredictable, unsettled, free, and, somewhere in her bones, it felt like that was exactly where she was meant to be. She wasn't scared. She was finally starting to feel ready. The email subject line stopped her mid-sip of coffee. Feature request, Modern Grace in a broken dress. Jolene blinked twice, unsure if her eyes were playing tricks. She clicked it open, reading every word slowly. A senior editor from Modern Radiance, a national lifestyle magazine, was requesting an exclusive interview. Your walk down the aisle, your composure, and that stunning jet exit have gone viral, the email read. We believe your story would inspire millions of women who've been told they're not enough. She reread the phrase, stunning jet exit, and nearly snorted. If they only knew how her knees buckled the second she was out of the chapel. She hadn't felt stunning. She had felt gutted. But the world had a way of packaging pain into palatable headlines, didn't it? Still, something in her stirred. Not vanity, not ego. Just the deep hum of finally being seen not as poor, not as pitiful, but as powerful. She forwarded the email to her father without comment. Minutes later, her phone rang. You should do it, he said, before even greeting her. You think? You don't need to be polished, just be honest. Your story isn't about money, it's about dignity. They'll ask about you, she said. They'll dig into everything. Let them, he said. I'm not hiding anymore. She closed her laptop and walked toward the mirror. The dress still hung there, defiant and wrinkled. She reached for it. A week later, the photo shoot happened on a sunlit rooftop, the same one where she'd shared coffee with her father. The stylist was gentle with her hair, asking permission before every touch. The makeup artist dabbed concealer under her eyes, but left her freckles alone. "You look like you already belong on the cover," one of them whispered. Jolene smiled, a strange confidence blooming where shame used to live. The photographer suggested a handful of designer gowns, but Jolene shook her head and held up the original wedding dress. "I want to wear this," she said. "They laughed at it. But this is the dress I wore when I told the world I mattered." The team hesitated, then nodded. When she stepped in front of the lens, something clicked, internally and literally. She didn't pose. She stood. She didn't smile. She looked into the camera as if to say, "You see me now?" Good. Days later, the article dropped. "The bride who walked away, Jolene Fields on finding her worth." The response was overwhelming. Women from every corner of the country filled her inbox. Survivors of broken engagements, women who wore thrifted gowns, single moms, even a retired seamstress who said, "You looked like the future, not the past." At first, Jolene read each one with trembling fingers, overwhelmed. Then she began replying. Not with platitudes, but with truth. "Thank you. I see you too." Her father watched from the sidelines, pride stitched into every glance. "What's next?" he asked one evening. "Do you want to speak, write, build something?" "I want to start a foundation," she said, "for women rebuilding after being told they're too little for too long. Dresses, resumes, therapy funds, dignity grants, maybe?" He blinked. "Dignity grants?" "Yeah," she said, voice strong now. "Because sometimes what saves you isn't money. It's knowing someone thinks you're worth investing in." He nodded. "Then let's do it." Jolene sat at her window that night, watching the lights shimmer below, and finally understood something. Her story wasn't rare. It was just rarely heard. Now she had the chance to make it louder, for every woman still trembling in a too small dress, waiting to be seen. She knew the knock was him before she opened it. There was a certain rhythm to regret. It hesitated, knocked too soft, waited too long. Jolene stood in her suite's entryway, hand on the knob, heart still. She didn't owe him anything, not a second of her breath or a sliver of her grief. But curiosity isn't a clean thing, and healing doesn't mean forgetting. So she opened the door. Liam stood there in a charcoal blazer, hair still styled like the wedding morning, eyes tired like he hadn't slept since. "Hi," he said. "Don't," she replied. "Not with hi." He swallowed. "I wasn't sure if you'd slam the door. I might still." He looked past her shoulder at the pristine space behind her. "This is nice." "It's temporary," she said. "Like you." His face twitched. "I deserved that." "You deserve more than one sentence," she said. "But I've only got enough grace left for half of one." "I didn't know they were going to mock you," he started. "I didn't hear it at first." "But when you did," she cut in, "you said nothing. You didn't touch my hand. You didn't glare at your cousin. You didn't walk beside me. You let me stand there alone." I froze. "You watched." He stepped back, as if her words had weight. "I've never felt smaller than I did after you walked away. Now imagine how I felt standing there in a dress held by safety pins while your mother made jokes about clearance racks." He winced. "She called me after the article went viral, said I should fix this, said people are looking at her like she's a monster." "She should try feeling like me for a day," Jolene said. "Maybe then she'd understand." "I don't want you back because of pity," Liam said quickly. "I want you back because I know what I lost." "You lost a woman who sewed her own dress while waitressing double shifts," she said. "You lost a woman who was willing to build a future from scratch. And now, you've lost a woman who's finally realized she deserves better." "Do you love me?" he asked. She didn't blink. "I did." He nodded, throat tight. "Do you hate me?" No, she said, but I've learned that not hating someone doesn't mean you belong with them. A silence settled between them, not cruel but final. Then I'll go, he said. But I hope your story keeps rising. It will, she replied, with or without you. She closed the door slowly, firmly. Her hand lingered on the knob for a second, not out of longing but gratitude. Gratitude that she could close it, that she was the one choosing. She walked back into the suite and opened her notebook. She'd been outlining ideas for the foundation. Now she wrote a new name at the top of the page: the Rising Dress Fund. Beneath it, because being left doesn't mean you're broken. Sometimes it means you're free. That night, Jolene didn't cry. She slept. The producer's voice was calm but brimming with excitement. Jolene, you're live in 60 seconds. Just be yourself. Our viewers already adore you. Jolene sat under the hot studio lights in a crisp ivory blouse and soft blue slacks, her hair swept into a clean, elegant twist. A single pin held it all together, the same charm from the bracelet her father had given her, clipped beside her collar like quiet armor. She adjusted her earpiece as the countdown rolled in her head. 5, 4, 3. And welcome back to Morning Radiance. Today we have a story that's been captivating the nation. You may know her as the bride who walked away, but we know her as Jolene Fields. Jolene, thank you for being with us. She smiled gently into the camera. Thank you for having me. Your story has exploded. Fashion magazines, podcasts, even wedding blogs have been talking about that moment. What's it been like for you? Overwhelming, she said honestly. But not in the way people might think. It's not about fame. It's about how many women have written me, saying they saw themselves in that moment, standing in something they were proud of while others laughed. It's been humbling. The host nodded, visibly moved. You started something called the Rising Dress Fund. Can you tell us about that? Of course, she said. It's for women who've been left, dismissed, or disrespected, especially during big life events. We help fund therapy, interview clothes, wedding dresses that feel like them, and legal help when needed. But mostly we remind them they're not alone. There was a photo of you circulating, wearing the original dress again on a rooftop. Was that your choice? Jolene smiled. Absolutely. I wore it again because I realized that dress didn't humiliate me. People did. And I don't have to carry their shame anymore. A pause. Then a soft applause rippled across the studio. Backstage, her father watched from the monitor, arms crossed over his chest, eyes misting. He hadn't touched a microphone since his campaign days, but now he was holding a quiet pride that didn't need to be broadcasted. After the interview, as they left the building and headed down the sleek New York sidewalk, a teenage girl with a cheap bouquet of grocery store flowers ran up to her. "Miss Jolene," she gasped. "I just saw you. I watch the show every day with my Nana. The girl paused, looking suddenly self-conscious. "I wanted to get married next month, but canceled because I didn't think I'd look like a real bride in what I could afford. Then I saw your story. And I think maybe I do deserve my day, even if my dress isn't sparkly." Jolene crouched down, touched her hand. "Sparkle's not what makes you shine. You remember that." She hugged the girl, took the flowers, and watched her run off, grinning. Her father chuckled. "You're becoming the woman your mother prayed you'd grow into." "I hope I'm becoming the woman I needed 5 years ago," Jolene whispered. The next day, the Rising Dress Fund received $250,000 in donations and 112 new volunteer applications. Stories poured in, more than she could read in a day. But Jolene didn't rush. She knew now that healing had its own rhythm, and it wasn't loud. It was gentle. It was sitting with strangers who'd been broken and reminding them they could still choose what came next. And as she lay in bed that night, watching the blinking city through her window, she finally realized. The aisle she walked down wasn't a wedding path. It was an awakening. And she wasn't walking away anymore. She was walking forward. It arrived in a pale blue envelope with soft gold script tucked into a stack of fan mail. No return address, just Jolene's name, written with care. She nearly tossed it into the read later pile, but something made her pause. The handwriting felt familiar. Inside was a folded sheet of stationery and a single dried lilac pressed between the pages. She opened the note and immediately recognized the name at the bottom. Margaret Lowenstein, her mother's best friend, someone Jolene hadn't seen in over a decade. "Dear Jolene," it began, "I saw you on television." At first I didn't believe it. That poise, that fire, you were always such a quiet child. But I'd know your mother's eyes anywhere, and they're yours. She would have burst with pride. Jolene sat slowly, her hands trembling just enough to blur the edges of the ink. "Before your mom passed, she used to talk about the dress she wanted you to wear someday. It wasn't store-bought. It was a design she'd sketched on a napkin once. I kept that napkin." Tears slipped down Jolene's cheek as she turned the letter over. Tucked inside was a folded copy of that sketch. Tiny waist, flared skirt, delicate embroidery scrawled in notes along the seams. In her mother's handwriting. "She said you'd grow into strength, not softness, that one day people would look at you and see every sacrifice she made was worth it. You proved her right, honey, and if you ever want that dress made, I still sew. No spotlight, no applause. Just one small voice from the past reaching into her present and saying, 'You are seen. You were always worthy.'" Jolene called the number scribbled at the bottom. "Margaret?" "Oh, Jolene," the voice quivered. "It's really you." "Would you still sew that dress?" Jolene asked. "I'd start tonight if I had the fabric." 3 days later, they met in person. Margaret's hands were smaller than she remembered, but still steady, still patient. They talked for hours, about her mom, about pain, about how much beauty could be woven out of loss. Margaret touched the worn seams of Jolene's old wedding dress. "This one gave you the courage to walk away," she said. "Let's make one that reminds you what you're walking toward." By the end of the week, Jolene had commissioned a limited line of dresses under her foundation's name. Each one modeled off that sketch, each one affordable, each one with a hand-sewn label stitched inside. "You are already enough." Orders came flooding in before they even finished the prototype. People didn't want status. They wanted soul. They wanted dignity. You could zip up yourself, shoulders straight, chin lifted. And on a chilly spring morning, Jolene visited her mother's grave with the sketch framed under her arm and the lilac tucked into her hair. "Mom," she whispered, "you weren't here to see me in that aisle, but you built the woman who walked away from it. And now, I think I'm starting to build something too." She stood there a long while before finally turning toward the future. Head high, story intact. Jolene had never expected to stand at the front of a chapel again, much less in front of a bride trembling in a $70 dress, clutching a bouquet of wildflowers she'd picked herself. But here she was, under soft string lights in a community garden turned sanctuary, officiating the wedding of one of the Rising Dress Fund's very first recipients. Her name was Daniela, a single mom who'd once sent Jolene a message saying, "You made me believe I could still be someone's first choice." Now, Daniela stood across from a kind man named Harris, who looked at her like nothing else in the world existed. And Jolene? Jolene stood in a simple navy dress, her hand steady on the binder containing the ceremony notes. She wasn't nervous. She was honored. "Marriage," she began, "is not built on sparkle. It's not about the cost of the dress or the size of the guest list. It's about what survives when the lights go out. It's about choosing someone who would walk beside you in silence and still hear everything you're afraid to say." Daniela teared up. Harris squeezed her hand. Jolene continued, her voice soft but certain. "I know many of you here have heard parts of my story. I was once left in front of an altar, too. But that moment didn't end me. It unwrapped me. It showed me what I would no longer accept and what I truly deserved. That's what Daniela has found here. Not just love, but a life that honors her worth." A hush fell. Then the couple said their vows, exchanging rings with trembling fingers, both laughing through their tears. When Jolene pronounced them husband and wife, the guests erupted in claps and cheers. But Daniela threw her arms around Jolene first, whispering, "You saved my life before I even met him." Jolene hugged her tightly, letting the words land. That evening, under golden sunset light and a sky full of applause, Jolene felt something she hadn't in a long time: completion. Later, as the music played and guests danced barefoot on the garden lawn, Jolene found a quiet bench beside Margaret, who'd been invited as a guest seamstress. "You did good," Margaret said, nudging her elbow. "They'll be okay." "Better than okay," Jolene replied. "They'll rewrite everything they were told they could never have." Margaret tilted her head. "And what about you?" Jolene smiled. "I think I've finally stopped looking back." A few feet away, her father clinked glasses with the local mayor, both laughing about something. Behind them, a news anchor from Morning Radiance waved, hinting they might run another piece. And in her pocket, Jolene's phone buzzed, a notification that someone else had just donated $5,000 to the fund. But she didn't reach for it. Not yet. For now, she let the moment be quiet, unfilmed, unposted. Just hers. The wedding had ended, but something bigger had begun. Something she wasn't walking away from, but into. A life where dignity was the standard, not the exception. The boutique was empty, just the faint hum of ceiling lights and the soft creak of polished floorboards beneath her heels. Jolene stood before a tall mirror in the private fitting room, hands at her sides, breath caught somewhere between memory and becoming. She wore it. Not a replica, not an interpretation. The real thing, her mother's dress, sketched on a napkin 2 decades ago, now brought to life by Margaret's careful hands. It was ivory satin, simple yet timeless, with delicate lilac embroidery hidden along the hemline, just for her. Jolene didn't cry. She simply stood there, eyes meeting her reflection, as if to say, "You made it." Margaret stepped in quietly behind her, holding a tray with pins, though none were needed. "Fits like she knew your shape before you did," she whispered. "She did," Jolene replied. "She always did." Outside the room, a team from Modern Radiance waited. This time, not for an exposé or a viral shot, but for a cover celebrating the first anniversary of the Rising Dress Fund. They'd asked her what she wanted to wear. She hadn't hesitated. This. They'd asked for a story. She'd said, "No headlines this time, just the photo. The dress will speak." As Margaret fastened a tiny hidden button behind her waist, Jolene looked into the mirror once more. The woman staring back wasn't a runaway bride. She wasn't a charity case. She wasn't even a headline anymore. She was the founder of a movement, a daughter, a woman whose no had become the world's yes. The photo shoot took place in a botanical conservatory, sunlight pouring through the glass ceiling like blessing. Jolene stood in the center, surrounded by flowering vines and antique mirrors, but her eyes never left the lens, She didn't pose. She simply stood with dignity. She didn't smile broadly, just enough to say, "This is what healing looks like." Afterward, as the team packed up and the room emptied, she stayed behind. Alone now, she slipped out of the dress carefully, laying it across a velvet bench. Her fingers hovered over the fabric, then traced the hem where her mother's initials had been stitched. She pressed her forehead to it. "You would have laughed at the drama, Mom," she whispered, "but I hope you'd be proud of the ending." Back in her everyday clothes, she left the conservatory quietly, declining a ride. Instead, she walked the 5 blocks home, the spring wind tugging gently at her hair. She passed a mural of herself someone had painted on a brick wall. Her in the old dress, walking away from a chapel. Underneath, "You are not broken." She paused, smiled softly, and kept walking. That night she lit a candle at her windowsill, the framed sketch of the dress beside it. Not to mourn, to honor. Because now she'd walked the full circle. And in doing so, she'd built something thousands could step into. As the flame flickered low, Jolene whispered, "Mom, I wore it. And I was enough." Please like, share, and subscribe to support more true-hearted stories on General Common Tales. If your daughter walked down that aisle alone, would you have stood with her or watched in silence? Tell us in the comments.